They adopted me to serve the golden child. When I refused, Mom said, "We didn't adopt you to say no." I built receipts, called police, and a week later, the judge backed me, and the next filing wasn't mine. All right, Reddit. Throwaway for obvious reasons. I, 23 male, adopted at 16 into a house already packed with kids and one golden child older brother, Brandon. Family helps family basically meant I was his unpaid handler. Fast forward. I moved out, got a youth center job, and Mom started drop and dash, leaving his kids on my porch and even showing up at my work to make me babysit. I started documenting everything. Fair warning, it gets messy, lol. Here's what went down. Before all this, I was the kid who knew shelter intake hours and which aunt's couch was safe for a week. Caseworkers came and went. Backpacks stayed packed. I learned to be quiet, helpful, light to carry. Skills that look noble on paper and get you drafted in real life. One day, a couple took me in. They called it adoption. I learned it meant absorption. Their house ran on a two-part system. There's a golden child who can do no wrong, and a scapegoat who absorbs the fallout. Guess which slot I filled? If there was a mess, I was the mop. If there was blame, I was the bulletin board. I was 16 when I got adopted. If you picture a warm family hug and some motivational Hallmark moment, delete that. Picture walking into a house already overflowing with kids, one of them a self-proclaimed golden child who believed they were the main character, and then being told you're basically there to make their life easier. That's the vibe. That was Brandon, Mom's golden boy. 19 then, already convinced the house revolved around his schedule. Mom introduced me to the family motto on day one: family helps family. Translation: congratulations, you're Brandon's personal assistant. She handed me a laminated calendar like she was onboarding me for an unpaid internship. The calendar wasn't for me, of course. It was all Brandon. Brandon's school schedule, Brandon's therapy appointments, Brandon's me time slots, Brandon's chores that somehow migrated to my column. My name didn't appear anywhere, because clearly I wasn't the priority. Dad stood nearby like the world's most decorative piece of furniture. He had that look of a man who'd mastered saying nothing at the right volume. He adjusted the thermostat like it was a diplomatic mission and let Mom play PR for Brandon. If silence could collect a paycheck, Dad was retired 5 times over. Brandon himself greeted me the way you'd greet a fly in your soda. He walked past, looked me up and down, and asked Mom if I was permanent. She said yes. He looked at me and said, "Not my problem." He was technically wrong. He made himself my problem every single day. But I appreciated the attempt at honesty. The first week was a crash course. I learned where the spackle was because Brandon liked punching doors, like they'd personally wronged him. I learned the vice principal's extension because I was the one who got called when Brandon decided school was optional. I learned that Mom's definition of family meant I became the default driver, the on-call homework helper, the person who showed up at the dentist because Brandon had stuff to do. Spoiler, his stuff was playing video games in the basement. And then came school. I thought maybe outside the house he'd let me exist quietly. Wrong. First week of classes, the teacher asked everyone to introduce themselves. Brandon stood up and said, "By the way, he's not my brother." Pointed right at me. Everyone laughed because no one wants to be the person who doesn't laugh. The teacher awkwardly cleared her throat and moved on. Brandon recycled that line whenever he could. Lunch table? Not my brother. Gym class? Not my brother. Assembly about internet safety? Guess what? Still not his brother. He said it so often you'd think it was legally binding. Back at home, he was treated like royalty. He got a free car at 19. Not a nice car, but still. Keys in his hand, freedom to leave whenever. Mom calling it a step toward independence. Meanwhile, I got a chore list on the fridge, written in dry erase marker. Pick up Zoe from choir, take Miles to practice, drive Leo to the orthodontist, cook dinner when Melissa had youth group. Yes, they're all my siblings. Big family. Clean the kitchen when Dad was busy. Apparently, my step toward independence was mastering the fine art of unclogging sinks and pretending it was a life skill. The wall of family photos in the living room was its own scoreboard. There were endless framed pictures of Brandon's birthdays, Melissa's activities, Lucas and his fiance's vineyard trip, Zoe at dance recitals, Miles with his soccer team, my contribution, a couple of grainy shots shoved near the hallway, one of them crooked like even the nail didn't want to support me. Every new milestone meant another smiling frame for someone else. Mom always said we'd get a proper picture day eventually. Weird how my calendar never matched up. Brandon continued to live like the rules were optional. He went out whenever, came back whenever, and the house just adjusted to him. If I asked for something simple, like a ride to a work-study program. Suddenly, the car had spiritual commitments. But if Brandon wanted to go see a friend at midnight, the car was resurrected instantly. Mom called it choosing your battles. Dad called it nothing. He didn't call anything. I figured the least I could do was make myself useful. I patched holes in the walls. I learned how to fix toilets. I became the household IT guy when Brandon rage quit games so hard, he knocked the Wi-Fi offline. The funny part? Mom kept saying things like, "It's so good having you here. You're such a help." As if being a one-man maintenance crew was the dream gig of every 16-year-old. By the time I turned 20, I was done. I found a crappy apartment with a kitchen floor that slanted enough to make eggs roll on their own and a view of a parking lot. But it had one magical thing: a fridge without a chore list. I moved my stuff out, folded the chore list in half, and kept it in a drawer. The youth center hired me on part-time, and I suddenly had a paycheck that didn't get guilted out of me. Working at a youth center also meant sitting through trainings on documentation and when to call non-emergency if a kid was getting put in a bad spot. Of course, leaving didn't mean I was free. Mom and Brandon acted like I'd simply relocated the satellite office of my helping duties. The calls kept coming. Brandon's car was acting up. Brandon needed a ride. Brandon needed someone to explain to his teacher why he wasn't in class again. Zoe needed a ride because Uber wasn't free. Miles forgot his cleats and had practice in 30 minutes. Mom always led with, "Can you do me a quick favor?" Her definition of quick was 3 hours minimum. My replies got shorter. Busy. Didn't matter. The requests kept stacking. I stopped by the house one day to grab a box of old clothes. The living room wall had a fresh round of photos. Brandon and Kelly with Noah in a pumpkin hat, Lily on a blanket, Lucas and Lauren looking like an engagement catalog, Melissa at a corn maze. My 2 photos had been downgraded to the hallway near the laundry room. I asked Mom where my prom picture went. She said the frame cracked. She promised she'd reprint it. She promised the printer had been acting weird. She promised a lot. None of it mattered. Dad adjusted the thermostat and said a cold front was coming. That summed it up. 16 to 20 was basically a training program in how to exist as a background character. Brandon got spotlight treatment for everything. I got a dry erase marker and a reminder that family helps family. It took me 4 years to realize help was just code for do everything no one else feels like doing. I thought moving out would finally close that chapter. The joke was on me. By the time this part rolled around, I'd been out of that house for a while. I had my own place, a steady job, and the kind of schedule that didn't revolve around Brandon's temper tantrums. He'd moved on too, married Kelly, had Noah and Lily, and decided parenthood meant delegating every responsibility to whoever was dumb enough to answer their phone. Mom, of course, stayed in her role as head cheerleader for the golden child, pretending he was thriving while quietly outsourcing his mess to me. Which is how we ended up with her storming into my job like she owned the place. If you've ever worked a job where the customers act like you're their butler, imagine that. But the customer is your mother, and she brings a baby as collateral. That's what happened when Mom showed up at my workplace one Thursday afternoon with Noah strapped into a car seat like a ticking time bomb. I was stocking shelves, minding my business, and suddenly there she was, blocking the aisle saying, "Clock out, we need you." Not, "Can you help?" Not, "Are you free?" Just an order like she was the manager now. The actual manager was standing 10 feet away, pretending to rearrange tape measures, but obviously listening. Mom said it louder than necessary, repeating that family helps family, and that I needed to come babysit right now. She even gestured toward Noah like the baby was proof of purchase. I told her no. She blinked at me like the word no was in a language she hadn't learned. She tried again, this time louder. "He's your nephew. Don't you care about family?" My manager raised an eyebrow, and I could see him trying to figure out if this was some sort of prank. I repeated myself. No, I wasn't leaving work to babysit. She looked offended, huffed about how I was ungrateful, and that I owe her a lot for adopting me, and that I would have been homeless without her, and stomped off with Noah like I'd ruined her afternoon. That should have been the end of it. Spoiler, it wasn't. Mom started a new tradition I like to call drop and dash. At first, it was once a week. She'd pull up in front of my apartment, set Noah on my doorstep with a diaper bag, and text, "Back in 20, which meant 2 to 6 hours. By week 2, after a 90-minute no-show and no replies, I called non-emergency. That's when the CPS file opened. I'd open the door, find Noah staring at me like even he knew this was ridiculous, and then I'd wait for Kelly to show up looking tired and apologetic. It escalated. Soon it wasn't just Noah. Lily joined the party once she was old enough to sit upright. Mom would pull up, dump both kids like they were a takeout order, and peel out of the driveway before I even had a chance to argue. One morning she did it at 6 a.m., dropping them off like it was my shift at a daycare I didn't sign up for. My phone would ding with her "back in 20" text, and I'd watch the clock like I was timing a marathon. 2 hours, 3, sometimes 4. I started documenting everything: doorbell cam footage, timestamps, screenshots of her texts. Not because I thought it would ever come in handy, but because it gave me a twisted sense of satisfaction to build a case file. Every time she dumped the kids, I added another entry. It was like my own personal petty archive. The best part? Mom acted like this was totally normal. If I said something about it, she'd wave her hand and say, "Families share the load." Share? There was no sharing. I was the load-bearing wall while Brandon got to act like he lived in a hotel. He wasn't babysitting. Melissa wasn't babysitting. Nobody else was getting surprise dawn deliveries of small humans. It was me, every time. One night she left Noah with me and then didn't answer her phone for hours. I texted, I called, nothing. Finally, Kelly showed up, red-faced and apologizing, saying she had no idea Mom had left him with me. That's when it clicked that even Kelly wasn't in the loop half the time. Mom was just freelancing her own childcare system, and I was the free contractor. It turned into a joke at the youth center where I worked. I'd show up with bags under my eyes and the staff would ask, "Babysitting shift again?" I'd shrug. Because how do you explain that your parents are basically running a human rental service and you're the inventory? The more I pushed back, the more Mom doubled down. "It's good practice for you," she said once, like I was an intern in training. Another time she told me I should be grateful I got to spend time with the kids, as if watching toddlers cry for 4 straight hours was some kind of exclusive privilege. So I told her point blank to stop, and the next time she tried it, I called non-emergency and filed a neglect report. They took my statement and updated the existing CPS file. Brandon's kids weren't my responsibility, and I wasn't about to keep playing free daycare just because she thought the word family was a magic spell. The kicker? Brandon never showed up to pick them up anyway. He always sent Kelly, or worse, let Mom do it. The guy had no problem standing in front of a crowd in high school and yelling that I wasn't his brother, but suddenly I was the only one qualified to keep his kids alive? I wasn't buying it. I knew exactly what was happening. Mom figured she'd guilt me into babysitting until it became a permanent arrangement. Brandon figured if he ignored the problem long enough, it would solve itself. The hospital episode started because Brandon can't manage anything louder than a microwave beep. Kelly called me close to midnight. Noah had hives crawling across his stomach after dinner, and she couldn't tell if it was from the new puree or if the planet was just bored. Brandon was in the garage, which is code for losing to his Xbox and pretending it's a power outage. So I got the call. The same guy Brandon used to point at in hallways and announce wasn't family was now the emergency contact when his kid's skin turned into bubble wrap. I threw on a hoodie and drove to the ER. Kelly was at admissions answering questions she didn't have answers for. Noah was mad at life. The triage nurse looked at me and started firing the standard list. I gave times, foods, symptoms, and recent changes, because I actually listen when people speak. They dosed him, watched him, and wrote up a sheet that said he was okay unless something changed. Kelly handled Noah like a mom who has learned how to juggle 3 things with one hand. Brandon rolled in once the printout was already warm, stared at the bracelet on Noah's wrist like it held secrets, and said something about the parking being terrible. At the sliding doors of the ER, Kelly gave me a quick thank you while juggling Noah's diaper bag and paperwork. I told her to text me if anything changed. Before I could step away, Brandon chimed in. Not with gratitude, of course, but with a lecture. He said I'd been too slow to get there, that I needed to pay closer attention to Noah, and that I could have cost him his child. This from the same guy who was in the garage playing Xbox when Kelly first called me. I just stared at him, wondering how he managed to twist me saving his kid into a performance review. Classic golden child logic. I was half asleep when my phone buzzed again. Kelly sent screenshots, not emojis. It was Mom and Melissa workshopping my life in a private chat. "We have to ease him back into the family," Mom typed. "He'll fall in line once he's around the kids enough." Melissa had the strategy notes. "He's soft on babies. He'll say yes if it looks urgent." Then Mom again. "He should be grateful he gets to help." I scrolled. It was a full campaign. Use the kids as leverage. Pretend it's normal. Keep repeating that family helps family until it sounds like a rule, not a manipulation. Kelly's message under the screenshots just said, "I'm sorry. I didn't know she was doing this." I told her it was fine and saved every single image to a folder with a name that would make a lawyer smile. The next morning, Kelly called with a pitch. She wanted a written babysitting agreement. She said it would make expectations clear, stop any surprises, and get Brandon to commit to actual times like he wasn't allergic to clocks. I told her Brandon's history with commitments was one long blank page. She said this would be different if we wrote it down. She sounded like someone who'd been on the wrong end of too many vague promises. I agreed to one trial. Not a new job, not a rotating schedule. One night. If it worked, great. She'd have a template. If it didn't, the file would get another neat entry. We sat at their kitchen table like we were closing on a house. Kelly brought out a printed template she found online and filled in the blanks. Hours: 7 in the evening to midnight. Pay: $20 per hour. Check-ins by text at 9 and 11. Emergency protocol: call immediately, leave the venue if necessary, reimburse mileage if I had to move the kids. Pickup window: 15 minutes on either side, then overtime. It was hilarious and depressing in equal measure that we needed this for two people who live across town. She signed. I signed. Brandon signed with a flourish, like he was doing me a favor by agreeing to pick up his own children on time. I took a photo of the page, then took a photo of Brandon's signature alone, then saved both to the folder with the screenshots. If the past few months had taught me anything, it was that paper beats memory. The night showed up. I arrived at 6:50 because I assumed someone would claim I was late if I didn't. Kelly gave me the bullet points. Bottle at 8. Story at 9. Noah likes the frog book, not the truck book. Lily goes down if the room is quiet. If it isn't, she protests. Brandon hovered by the hallway and made a comment about not waking the kids because he just got them down last night. I didn't say out loud that the night before he had been yelling at his game until 1 in the morning. I nodded, took the bag of supplies, and told them to enjoy their evening. Noah dozed after his bottle. Lily complained for a minute, then went silent with the pacifier doing its job. I texted Kelly at 9 on the dot with a status line. All good. Both asleep. No reply. I watched a muted nature show, because anything with dialogue risks waking a kid with a voice they suddenly must hear. At 10, I walked the hallway once and checked the doors. At 11, I sent the second check-in. Still good. See you at midnight. No reply. Midnight landed and nobody landed with it. I gave it 10 minutes, then 15. At 12:20, I sent another message. Nothing. At 12:45, I called Kelly. Her phone went to voicemail after one ring, which usually means the phone is upside down on a table or someone hit decline. At 1 o'clock, I texted both of them. Contract says midnight. Please confirm ETA silence. At 1:15, I called Brandon. Straight to voicemail. At 1:30, I texted, if I don't hear from you by 2, I will contact a sitter service to transfer care per emergency line in agreement. You are responsible for the fee. That wasn't in the contract, but it should have been. At 2:10, the front door finally opened. Brandon walked in first, acting like he was early. Kelly followed, eyes on the floor. I pointed at the clock. He went for a joke about how time flies. I brought up the contract. He smirked and said he knew I could handle it. I asked why they ignored check-ins. He said his phone died. I asked where the charger was. He said, do you want me to pay you or argue about chargers? I said yes to the first option. He patted his pocket and got cute. I forgot my wallet. Kelly said she'd get it. He stopped her and said he'd do it next time. I said there wouldn't be a next time. He delivered the classics. Don't be dramatic. We're family. This is why Mom says you make everything difficult. I repeated the terms in simple words and said they broke them. He took a sports drink out of the fridge like the conversation was over. I went home. At home, I didn't write a novel. I wrote a business note. Subject: termination of childcare agreement. 2 lines. Due to your failure to comply with the agreed hours and communication terms on January 14th, I will not be providing childcare in the future. See attached copy of signed agreement. I attached the photo of the signature page and the timestamp text from 9/11 and after midnight. I copied Kelly and copied Mom. Hit send. My phone lit up less than 15 minutes later. No surprise, it was Mom. She opened with, "You can't be serious." I told her I was. She tried the "families don't use contracts" line, so I reminded her that families also don't abandon kids on whoever answers the door. Then came the accusation. Apparently, I was punishing Brandon for being late. I corrected her. It wasn't punishment. It was me refusing to bankroll his inability to read a clock. She pivoted to forgiveness. I pivoted to the fact that I had work in the morning. She insisted people make mistakes. I pointed out mistakes become patterns when no one cares enough to stop them. She tried one last jab, saying I sounded like a guidance counselor. I told her that was the nicest feedback she'd given me in a year. Click, call over. I logged the whole exchange in my notes, adding a line about her admitting Brandon was late and framing my refusal as punishment. Not because I expected anyone else to care, but because I knew this was just the warm-up for whatever came next. 2 days later, a message from Kelly hit my phone. "I paid you," and a screenshot of a transfer that hit right after. It covered the hours and added an extra 20. She didn't say sorry this time. She didn't need to. She understood the concept. Work delivered, invoice covered. I replied, received. We didn't debate anything. That would have wrapped the experiment, except Mom never met a boundary she didn't treat like a suggestion box. She started texting new angles. "Just for an hour today. Only Noah, not Lily. I'm outside. Answer the door." When I didn't, she called the center's front desk asking if I was on shift, because apparently my job schedule is public information if you're persistent enough with small talk. I told the manager to route family calls to voicemail and wrote a note in my file that any in-person contact should be directed off-site unless prearranged. Boring admin stuff, the kind that saves you later. Brandon, for his part, pretended nothing had changed. He sent one text 3 days after the email. "When can you take them again?" I responded with the same 2 words that have kept me sane since moving out. "I can't." He sent a thumbs up, then followed with, "Mom said you're being stubborn." I didn't reply. 10 minutes later, "She'll bring them by." I replied with a screenshot of the email termination. He sent back LOL. I archived the thread. 2 weeks after the failed trial, I swung by Dad's to pick up a toolbox I'd left in the garage. He wasn't home. Mom was. She opened the door holding Lily like a trophy and announced that she needed to run to the store. I said I was leaving. She said Lily would nap. I pointed at my car. She said it would take 15 minutes. My doorbell cam caught the rest because she tried the same thing later that week at my place. She sets a kid down, sends back in 20, and expects compliance. The camera got the timestamp. The text got the time. The pickup got recorded when Kelly came by 90 minutes later after I sent her a photo. Every part of it went into the folder. Contract signed, contract breached, exit email sent, Mom continuing like we never signed anything. You don't need to be a lawyer to see the outline of a story. And this one writes itself when people refuse to read. One more thing happened that month. Kelly texted asking if I could scan and send her a clean copy of the agreement for her own records. I sent it. She replied with a single line, "Thank you for doing this the right way." She didn't ask me for another night. She didn't argue about my exit. She didn't try to guilt me. I assumed she was running her own math. She lives with Brandon. She knows what enforcement looks like when he decides he's exempt. Paper is the only thing that has a chance. You'd think after a failed babysitting contract, an exit email, and me spelling no in 10 different fonts, the circus would calm down. Instead, it evolved. Brandon and Mom operate like the laws of time and responsibility are optional, so naturally the universe decided to throw in a citywide blackout just to make sure my folder of evidence didn't get lonely. The power went out around 9 o'clock one evening. I had my phone on low brightness scrolling through work emails when Kelly called. Her voice was sharp, like the world was ending. The garage gate at her place had locked shut mid-close. She was stuck outside in the dark, and Noah was crying like the lead singer of a metal band. Brandon? He was inside, glued to his phone, complaining that a ranked queue he'd been in didn't count. I grabbed a flashlight, drove over, and found Kelly outside with Noah in his car seat, shuffling in the cold. Brandon had cracked the garage door 6 inches, but didn't think to help. I slid the beam of the flashlight under the gate and told her to pull back so it didn't crush the stroller. Neighbors gathered because nothing gets people outside faster than a chance to watch someone else's drama for free. I waved traffic away, kept Noah from being boxed in, and waited until the fire department came with actual tools. Kelly thanked me. Brandon stomped around yelling about cheap wiring and lazy city workers. Everyone else saw what they saw. One person solving problems, one person whining about them. The blackout lasted 3 hours, long enough for Brandon to complain about missing 3 matches and tell everyone about it like he'd been personally attacked. 2 days later, I found Dad's old ledger notebook while grabbing a wrench from the garage. It wasn't a diary. It was a budget book. Groceries, utilities, tuition payments, normal stuff. Then I hit the Brandon section. Bail money, late fees, insurance spikes, incident costs that looked suspiciously like damages. Then another note. Placement offset, teen can manage chores and school runs. Teen meaning me. Cold way to talk about your own adopted kid. They had literally calculated me as a line item to balance Brandon's screw-ups. I took a picture, because of course I did. The week after that, Lily almost choked on a snack during one of Mom's surprise drop-offs. She coughed, panicked, and turned red. Mom froze, Brandon yelled. Kelly cried. I grabbed her, did the step I'd read about online, and the snack piece flew out. She started crying, which was better than silence. We drove to the ER just in case. The doctor looked right at me and said, "Good work. You did exactly the right thing." Said it loud enough for everyone to hear. Kelly nodded. Brandon rolled his eyes and said I was showing off. That's the running theme. Anytime I prove I can handle basic responsibility, Brandon feels like I stole his spotlight. The truth is he never had one. But Mom keeps pretending the crown is real, and Dad keeps adjusting the thermostat like that's going to fix anything. So yeah, by that point the evidence folder wasn't just full, it was overflowing. Blackout rescue, ledger photos, choking incident, ER doctor compliment, Brandon's constant parade of being useless. And I knew it was only going to get dumber. If you've ever wondered what happens when you keep saying no and someone keeps pretending they didn't hear you, welcome to my life. Mom had been running her drop-and-dash babysitting service like it was a franchise, and apparently business was booming. No matter how many emails, contracts, or recorded refusals I had, she treated every boundary like a suggestion box. And then one morning she decided to level it up from annoying to criminal. It was 5 in the morning, still dark out, raining sideways, and I was actually asleep for once. My doorbell cam pinged, and when I checked the footage later, there it was. Mom hustling up my steps with Noah on one hip, Lily in a car seat, diaper bag slung over her shoulder. She plopped them both down on my porch like Amazon Prime delivery, texted, "Back in 20," and peeled out of the driveway before the motion sensor light even switched off. By the time I opened the door, the kids were staring at me like they couldn't believe this was real either. I brought them in, got them warm, and tried calling. No answer. Tried again. Still nothing. At 6:15, I was still holding a baby bottle in one hand and my phone in the other with no response. That's when I decided the file folder on my hard drive had graduated to the next level. I called non-emergency and reported abandonment under the existing CPS file. They sent someone out, took statements, and flagged the case for immediate court action. Within a week of that escalation, the court granted a protective order naming Mom and Brandon. No contact with me at home, work, or events, and no drop-offs. Not just for an hour, not at all. The look on her face when she got served must have been priceless. I didn't see it, but I heard about it. She ranted to everyone who would listen about how ungrateful I was, how I had humiliated her, how I was tearing the family apart. Meanwhile, I had PDFs, videos, and police reports. Then I requested the body cam footage from the responding officer, because why not? A month later, an audio file landed in my inbox. Mom's voice, clear as day. We didn't take him in so he could say no. Direct quote. Straight from her mouth. Captured on city property, now stored safely on my drive. You can't script better evidence than that. Brandon, of course, couldn't resist his own stunt. One evening during the protective order period, he decided to come by unannounced. He banged on the door, demanded I hand over the kids because Dad said it was fine, and tried to shoulder his way in. Luckily, I'd already chained the door. I pulled out my phone, started recording, and narrated the whole thing like I was hosting a documentary. Here's Brandon attempting to take children during an active protective order. Timestamp, 8:12 p.m. Then I called non-emergency again. They showed up, wrote it down, and added it to the case file. Another neat little brick on the wall. Mom blamed the weather, Brandon blamed me, and Dad blamed, you guessed it, the thermostat. I didn't care who blamed what. The paper trail was thick, and for once it wasn't my word against theirs. It was texts, cameras, contracts, body cams, and police reports. Paper beats memory. Every time. After the order, everything got quieter in that loud way consequences do. The calls dried up. The back in 20 texts stopped. Mom learned that no contact means the same thing whether you whisper it or laminate it. She tested it once with a drive-by, left cookies on my car hood. An officer logged it as a warning. Kelly made her own move. She filed for divorce and asked for temporary orders the same week the protective order landed. Her petition had the usual boxes checked: primary custody, decision-making, child support, and a stack of exhibits that looked suspiciously like my folder printed out. The signed babysitting agreement, the midnight no-show texts, the porch drop timestamps, and the body cam quote. I didn't testify to anything. Paper did. CPS wrote a safety plan that could have been copied from common sense. No unscheduled drop-offs, no third-party handoffs, and I'm not a caregiver of record. Don't route childcare through me. Period. Daycare and the pediatrician updated their do not release lists. Pickups are Kelly or Kelly's mother. That's it. Family court gave Kelly temporary physical custody. Brandon got short, supervised blocks at the visitation center until he finishes a parenting class and shows he can handle basics like being on time and answering his phone. The judge called it structure. Brandon called it bias. The clock called it, you're late again. Mom switched to persuasion, then to pressure. After Kelly filed for divorce, Mom hitched herself to Brandon and flooded Kelly's voicemail with second chances talk. Then she escalated. She brought Brandon to my building to beg me to talk Kelly out of this. I pointed at the no contact order and the camera above the door, called non-emergency, and the officer documented the violation, the cookie stunt, had already earned her a warning, and told them to leave. Since then, her efforts live where she's allowed to be. Church group chats and Kelly's voicemail. She keeps saying, family helps family. I keep saying court orders help kids. I don't follow her posts. Mute is a boundary with a volume knob. Dad texted that a cold front was coming. Brandon moved in with a friend for a while, then back to Mom's. He sent 3 late-night messages about how I ruined his family, followed by a thumbs down when I didn't reply. Kelly sent 1 daytime message that mattered. The kids have their routine back, and her lawyer said the documentation made the filings easy. Her next line was shorter. Thank you. Melissa apologized in a way that made it about her, then spun up a family logistics group chat with me added. I left and reminded her not to relay for Mom or Brandon. Proxy contact still counts. Lucas and Lauren went full Switzerland with 1 neutral DM. We love you both, hope this settles down. No gasoline? Fine by me. Leo sent the only message that mattered. You're my brother. Need a ride? And stopped routing favors through me. Real support is less weight, not bigger words. Zoe and Miles are kids. They send dog videos and homework questions from their own phones, and I tell them 2 things. I'm here for you, and I'm not a courier. That's the whole prize, really. Not a victory parade, just quiet. The doorbell doesn't announce emergencies someone else scheduled for me. My phone doesn't audition me for unpaid jobs. And when people insist the past didn't happen, I don't argue. PDFS remember. YouTube just dropped this new hype feature. If you're hooked on this story, smash that hype button. It tells YouTube this video deserves to blow up, and it keeps even crazier stories coming your way.